the people in this room know me well enough to have a sense of what my principles are. I am a Republican. I was a Democrat for a long time. I was pretty much raised in it. And I was an active Democrat. But then it came to a point in my life where I simply took evaluation of my own personal principles, my own beliefs. I started reading books that I had never read before. I started listening to radio shows and watching television programs that I had never watched or listened to before. You know, I considered myself to really be an Obama Democrat. And what that meant to me at the time, it was 2008, it was all about hope and change, was that we would have a political culture that, regardless of what party you were from, rejected the idea that we as Americans could not come together and find common ground. So I said, well, hey, as a good card-carrying Democrat and liberal, and person who worked very hard for then Senator Obama's campaign, I felt that it was incumbent upon me to really look at what the other side of the aisle was talking about so I could be able to really engage in a productive dialogue with people who maybe I didn't have the best understanding about. Well, you know, there's a little bit of a risk in that because sometimes you start studying what other people are talking about and you discover different things and new things about yourself, you know? And so I came to a point where I had to switch sides of the aisle, but for love of the same country, though, you know? And I'm a person today who, you know, I consider myself to be a conservative individual. But that part of me that seeks to build common ground between people of different ideologies, different philosophies, different political parties, that person who seeks to find a foundation of truth around which we can bring Americans together, that person is still here. That's irrespective of whatever party I am in. Now, having said that, it is important that we acknowledge the fact that the country is in a dire state of affairs, in part because the Republican Party doesn't seem to know who she is. As Republicans, we don't really seem to know who we are. Evan talked a little bit about how we don't want to just go criticizing people. We don't want to just go talk about, you know, we're going to cut this and cut that, so on and so forth. And it's ironic to me that the things in which we believe don't seem to carry an intrinsically more positive connotation than they often seem to. When Ronald Reagan cut taxes in the 1980s, when he made it much easier for businesses to hire people, for consumers to go out and pay the rent, pay the bills, to buy a home, he reined in federal spending in a host of areas. But the aggregate effect of that was to create wealth for all people. It was a creative process, not a destructive process. What we want to do is create wealth and value and opportunity for all Americans. So when I go in the inner city and I talk about my policies, conservative policies, Republican policies, I don't talk about it in terms of cutting spending. I talk about it in terms of creating opportunity. Absolutely, no, that's vital. That's vital. You know, I don't talk about it in terms of my being opposed to Obamacare or socialized medicine. I talk about it in terms of wanting to increase the quality, the quantity, and yes, the availability and the affordability of healthcare for all people. I'm not against socialized medicine. I'm for available, affordable, quality healthcare as can only be delivered by a truly free market approach to the issue. These are the things we need to recognize as Republicans. It's starting to become a little bit cliche. People talk about us as the party of no. Well, let me tell you, it's important to say no sometimes. You know? It is important to say no. It was important for the Republican Party to say no to what they passed as health care reform. But the only reason we wound up in a situation where we had to deal with this issue and ultimately be walloped by it, by the opposing party, was because we had Congress for 12 years. We had the presidency for 8 years. We had the White House and the Congress for 6 years. And we never really did anything about this issue. George W. Bush passed the Medicare Part D program, but all in all, and you can argue about that, but all in all, we left the issue of health care untouched. Now, taking it to my district very briefly, I come from the 43rd Congressional District is predominantly a Democratic and a minority area. The largest voting blocks by far are African Americans and Hispanics. I live just outside of Inglewood. You know, I lived for a year in the Jordan Downs projects in Watts. They're about to demolish and renovate that area now, but that was considered to be one of the top 5 most violent neighborhoods in Los Angeles for quite some time. In fact, likely remains so. You know, it is important that as I speak to the people in this community, I let them know it's not just a matter of me being opposed to individual things that I have an issue with politically, but I have viable solutions to put in their place, you know? And this is the significance of my race. It's not just about the 43rd Congressional District. It's not just about Torrance, Inglewood, and Hawthorne. It's not just about Maxine Waters. It's definitely not just about me. It's about the Republican Party of the 21st century. When this race really takes off, we may not quite be able to see it yet, but you might be able to see it for me. When this race really takes off, a lot of questions about the Republican Party as a whole are going to be answered in this race in the 43rd Congressional District of California. Is the Republican Party able to communicate to black people, to Hispanic people, to young people, to people that fall outside of the conventional tent of the Republican Party? That's the question that media is asking. That's the question the Democrats are asking and feeling quite confident that the answer to that is no. It's a question that Republicans, of course, are asking themselves. That question will be answered to a significant extent in this race. And it's not just a matter of myself and what I have to offer that's going to ultimately provide the answer to that question. It's a question of whether or not every single person in this room is a person who is genuinely beyond the negative stereotypes that the media has and will continue to put upon you. We are easy to defeat if you can so easily be labeled as racist, as heartless, vulture, capitalists. I know I'm in a room full of a bunch of rich people, so don't feel bad about that. Right. That's right. Well, fiscal conservatives, you gotta save your dough. If we can be looked upon as religious and racial bigots and people who maybe pretend to care for the unborn but don't care for the living, if we are limited to these definitions, and if we sit back and accept them, then we have already lost. But if, on the other hand, you truly do care, and I'm speaking to each and every one of you individually, if you truly do care about Americans and the people at the very bottom of the economic ladder, my neighbors, the people I live with, the people I lived with in the projects, the people I live next to in Los Angeles and work with in Inglewood, that will shine through. And my campaign, my race, is nothing more than a gateway or a portal through which the entire nation can see that the things that they have said about each and every person in this room, effectively speaking, are wrong. You know, my father is, I come from an interesting background. My mother, to be simplistic about it, my mother is a black, liberal, New Ager from South Central Los Angeles, and my father is a white conservative from Tennessee, if you want to, yeah. And so I spent a lot of time growing up, and still do, frankly, explaining my father to my mother and vice versa. You know? So if you ask me why am I qualified to run this race, well, in a nutshell, that's basically it, you know. And it's funny, you know, my father, he was he was big for Mitt Romney in the last election, and my dad takes up a whole conversation by himself, but my father, you know, not shy about expressing his opinion about anything, and not shy about expressing his opinion about politics. Happy to go up to talk to anybody, young or old, white or black, about what he thinks about the election, what he thinks about Obama, which, you know, like Maureen, he's not a champion of self-restraint in that area, but don't clap. I'm always trying to pull him back a little bit. But it happens very often where, you know, he would say something, and, you know, maybe to some to some liberals or some black folks who might be offended by what he was saying. The person would be just on the edge of accusing him of being bigot, and he'd be like, "Oh, hold on a second, I want to introduce you to my son." So I just come talking over, just like, "Yeah, I'm black. I guess you didn't expect that." Yeah. But my father, my father is a conservative guy, sure. But his heroes growing up were Muhammad Ali, Miles Davis, and Willie Mays. He lived in the world of boxing. Boxing is actually very big in my background. He's a jazz musician by trade, jazz pianist. It's not a matter of color. It's a matter of values and what's in the best interests of the people of America. And those are the fault lines along which this conversation needs to progress. Now, I need so much help from each and every one of you. But the main battle in this race is going to be waged in the minority, and particularly in the black community. I have to go and deliver a message that says, in spite of everything that you've been told by the people we regard as authorities, Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, Michael Eric Dyson, Cornel West, about who it is Republicans are, what it is Republicans are, what their inner sinister feelings may be. I have to tell you something, folks, and I say this as a black man with a black mother, but Republican Party, for the most part, just people like my old man. People who have a traditional sense of what America was, dating back to America's founding, who seek to honor and uphold her founding principles. I myself speak as a man of faith who sees that as the very core of who and what this country is, but people who also just want what's best for everybody. And my father loves me more than he loves anyone in this world, as much as we butt heads, And so people need to see that. That's the great image and branding that has to change. And this election in the 43rd Congressional District against Maxine Waters, who's no more than the perfect poster child against which to deploy this argument, but this election, there will not be another opportunity like this. I'm not saying this to be self-serving. It's why I'm running, because I recognize this. This goes beyond just the 43rd. I want to be elected because I want to improve things in the 43rd. I want to improve things through good policy and a functional government in Washington, D.C. that raises the standard of living for people in the inner city and allows them to know that they don't have to be shackled by a bureaucratic, democratic regime, that regardless of whether you're Democrat or Republican, the track record is clear, not serving the interests of the people of those communities. But beyond that, we need to change the conversation in America. It has to go back to the issues and principles that serve the interests that will benefit all of us, black and white, Republican and Democrat. We can refocus that conversation as we show the world that you guys are well-meaning human beings, that that's what we are, that we have a different view of how it is this country should be run, but it's a view for the benefit of all Americans, not just for white people and certainly not just for rich people. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. This is what we are. This is who I am. I come from both of these worlds. And I do not want to see the country that I love, that gave me an opportunity to stand here and speak to you today, torn apart and riven in two by the polarizing rhetoric of political opportunists and people in the elite segments of our society who either, even if they're not malevolent, just do not understand who you are and who we are. But let us be decent and righteous in the way we pursue that conversation. Because that is what will lead them to respect us. That is what will lead the people in the inner city to trust us. Not just me, but each and every one of you, because I carry all of you with me as I go into these areas and speak to these people, my neighbors, my community. And so, I am humbled by both the challenge before me, but also by the honor and the responsibility that you guys are willing to entrust to me. It is no small thing, but I seek to bear my cross with faith, knowing that by believing in a better world, a better America, America that does not seek to improve itself by changing her founding principles, but by living up to them, we can create a country out of which we can all be proud. Thank you very much.